Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and join me in welcoming the CPA Board of Directors, the Congress Planning Committee chairs, and our special guests. Sorry, just wait, please. Please remain standing for our... Please remain standing for our national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Doug Treloar, your association president.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Canadian Physiotherapy Association, I would like to welcome you to Halifax and to Congress 2015. What a wonderful city. Just spectacular views. I'm sure everyone's had a chance to look around. It's my first time to Halifax, and just wow. It's and Allison, I think, is maybe on the weather committee, so thank you for the fantastic weather we've had. So keep it up. That'd be great. And thanks to the Nova Scotia branch for co-hosting the event. A very special welcome to all the first-time attendees. and certainly to our students, as well as the physiotherapist assistant members as well. This year's Congress is certain to meet and exceed all expectations. It is rich in educational content, featuring some of Canada's leading researchers and clinicians, along with international presenters. We have secured keynote speakers who will truly inspire you. You will note a revamped format for this year, and I'm sure you will agree that it is exciting and dynamic. I invite you to attend the 2 minutes, 2 slides. What a great way to catch a clinical pearl or two. I'd also suggest attending the auditor's desk, it's the Dragon's Den of Congress, and witness 4 entrepreneurs vie for the prize. If you require any assistance, make sure to look up one of the friendly Congress volunteers in the blue shirts. Do we have a volunteer that can... Anyways, the blue t-shirts in the back, so make sure they're very easy to engage and very friendly, so if you have any questions or need to find a room, they're there for you, so please use them. Please take time to reacquaint yourself with colleagues and friends, but perhaps more importantly, meet that new connection or that new friend. So I think we did this last year. So with that in mind, if I could ask everyone to stand and shake the hand of somebody that you do not know, just quickly. Introduce yourself.
Excellent timing. Thanks for the break. Oh, it's my fault.
All right, everybody. Thank you. All right. That's great, everyone. If we could maybe return to your seats. All right, everyone. That's great. So what I would suggest... Yeah, we need the piper back. So what I would suggest is that you keep that theme going for the next 2.5 days or 3 days that you're here. Just walk up to a stranger and introduce yourself. There's the no stranger, no danger, no danger, no stranger rule going, so it's safe. Everyone's safe to introduce yourself to. So keep that going through Congress. I would ask that you now take out your cell phones or your personal devices, and I would ask that you make sure that they are on, okay? We want them on all the time, yeah. By doing so, you can use these devices and share your Congress experience. And if I can figure this out here, we're going to do this right now. We're going to do a selfie. Smile. All right, so that's the easy part, taking the picture, and I'm not sure this 51-year-old guy knows how to tweet it out, but we'll deal with that after. And so it's hashtag Physio Congress, and we're also Facebooking, so please join us and engage that way. Are there any DAL grads here today? Yeah, all right. So congratulations on celebrating your 50th anniversary. That's pretty exciting. So well done. Finally, this is your Congress. Enjoy all that it has to offer. Enrich your personal and professional lives. Have a wonderful time, and thank you all for your ongoing support of CPA. So enjoy. Before we invite our special guests, I would like to take a moment to recognize the previous Enid Graham Memorial Lecture recipients who are here with us tonight or this afternoon. If you'd please stand to be recognized. Just an amazing group of people. I would like now, it gives me great pleasure now, to welcome the Honorable Leo Glavine, the Provincial Minister of Health and Wellness, to welcome you and us to the beautiful province of Nova Scotia.
Thank you very much, Doug, for that warm introduction, and what a great pleasure it is for me to be here and welcome you to Nova Scotia. I want to first of all recognize one of my colleagues from the legislature, who is a physiotherapist, Eddie Orrell, who represents riding in Cape Breton. I'm sure many of you from across the country have heard of the wonderful island of Cape Breton. And so I'm not sure if Eddie is here for the whole weekend or not, but you know, you never know in politics. You may have to return to your old career, you know. I thought for a moment when Doug got up and started with the selfie and the introductions and so on, I thought I was going to have to come up and practice my trade, and that is of teaching and getting the class back under control. But truly, we are a people of warm hospitality here in Nova Scotia. So on behalf of Premier McNeil and the Nova Scotia government, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Nova Scotia for your annual National Congress. And you've picked a wonderful time of year to visit Halifax as the weather is finally warming up, as we are trying to forget about a winter that, in fact, we will remember for some time. And there's lots to do now and see beyond the impressive agenda that you have for this event. And I'm certain you will have a very productive Congress with the many excellent speakers, as well as the opportunities to network and learn from your colleagues across the country. That is always the wonderful value of coming together as a profession, and one that I always placed great value in, as you share knowledge, you share experience, and you share passion for the work that you do. And I know you'll be moved and inspired by Scott Jones, who received tremendous support from the physiotherapy staff at the Nova Scotia Rehabilitation Centre during his recovery from a violent attack. I want to thank our physiotherapists at the rehab centre and at facilities and clinics across Nova Scotia, as well as all of our visiting members of the profession. Your work is so important to help people from all walks of life to move their bodies to the best of their abilities. And I know as I get older and want to continue playing hockey, I have a special physiotherapist in my life. So back in the Annapolis Valley. While your technical skills are related to biomechanics, you also support people who are in a wide variety of emotional states depending on the nature and cause of their mobility issues. Your compassion as you help people recover as much mobility as possible, whether they had a lot or a little to begin with, is often as important as the treatment and exercises you prescribe. For everything you do, I thank you most sincerely. I hope you have an excellent 3 days here at the Congress and enjoy your visit to Nova Scotia. Please come back and visit us again at any time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Glavine, for being with us today. That was great. Appreciate that. It is now my pleasure to invite and to introduce up to the stage Alison McDonald, the President of the Nova Scotia Physiotherapy Association.
I had a feeling that was for me. Well, it's great to know if I fall off of it, there's plenty of help around. So, Céad Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes on behalf of the Nova Scotia Physiotherapy Association. I want to extend a warm welcome to Congress 2015 delegates, speakers, volunteers, and honored guests. The Nova Scotia Physio Association is pleased to have so many visitors to our city. This year, Congress agenda is jam-packed, but everyone needs some downtime, and our vibrant city is the place to be. Halifax has many things to offer. If you have some free time, be sure to take a walk or a run along the Halifax waterfront, or a ferry ride to Dartmouth, where you will get one of the best views of Halifax. Or take in Citadel Hill, a National Historic Site, or St. Paul's Church, one of the oldest Anglican churches in Canada. Pier 21, the Canadian Museum of Immigration, is also not to be missed. But no trip to Halifax is complete without a tour of Keith's Brewery, a ride on the Halifax Harbour Hopper, or an ice cream from Cows, a PEI transplant. If time permits, visit our new Halifax Central Library and take in this modern architectural wonder, only a short walk away. It's worth the stroll, and they have great coffee as well. So if you're staying on after Congress, there's much to see and do outside the city. Peggy's Cove, beautiful vineyards, the Cabot Trail, fun day tides, beaches, golf courses, and the list goes on. In preparing for our opening remarks, Maura, Nova Scotia Physiotherapy Association's executive director, did some research as to how long CPA has held Congress. Research indicates that the first Congress was held in 1947 in Toronto, and after a brief hiatus, was held again in 1951 in Vancouver and held continuously since that date. That's 65 Congresses held between 1947 and 2015. So congratulations, CPA. There's another major milestone that's been mentioned, and that's the 50th anniversary of the first graduating class from Dalhousie University's School of Physiotherapy. Are there any graduates from that first graduating class of 1965 in the audience? Well, anyway, so if there is, and they're too sheepish to say, let's give them a warm welcome. I know there's one question that you're all dying to ask, and that is, why are Nova Scotians called blue nosers? Well, there are many legends about the origins of that name. One legend has it that Nova Scotia fishermen wore hand-dyed sweaters and mittens that left a blue stain on the nose when it was wiped with a sleeve or a hand. Another legend connects the name with the famous racing schooner, the Blue Nose. Other stories say that we're so named because of our cold and damp climate that turn our noses blue. And since I'm in charge of the weather, I guess I'm going to try my best to make sure that's not going to happen. Truth is, we'll never know why or how we got that name, but we will remain forever yours, Blue Nosers. So welcome to Halifax. We have a great program and exciting events ahead of us. So mingle, learn, and enjoy. Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. That was wonderful. It is now truly a great pleasure to invite Dr. Emma Stokes, the president of the World Confederation for Physical Therapy, to join us to provide a few words. And Emma is a true friend of CPA, so just a really warm welcome for Dr. Emma Stokes.
Good evening. I better put this in front of me. I'm not used to standing behind these. Thank you, Doug, for the introduction. Thank you, CPA, the board, and the members for the invitation to be here. I was coming anyway. This is my third CPA Congress. And I guess one of the things that you get to do, or at least don't get to do anymore, is to attend events anonymously. But I am absolutely thrilled to have the invitation, and it's a great privilege and honor to be here. I was elected as the president of WCPT in Singapore in May, just gone, and the Canadian Physiotherapy Association was one of the member organizations of WCPT that nominated me. And it was very important to me, personally and professionally, that I had that nomination. I had the great privilege of working with Mike Landry and his research group as a visiting scholar at the University of Toronto in 2010, and went home and said to my partner, John, at the time, the next place we move to is Canada. So I'm hoping I can come back at some point. One of the enormous privileges that I have as the president of WCPT is I get to see the people that represent you internationally, the leaders in your community, and how they represent you. And when they do that, they shine a light on the community from where they come. And I want to share with you and acknowledge the wonderful contribution that the President and the President-elect, Linda and Doug and Michael Brennan, the role that they had in Singapore was absolutely wonderful. But the Canadian physiotherapy community were extremely well represented at the Congress in Singapore. And you were involved in 43 sessions, either as chairs or participants, and great facilitators. And the light that it shines is reflected back on you, because Physiotherapy Canada and the Canadian physiotherapists that I have met in my travels around the world are reflective of what I understand in Canada, the great gifts that you have in terms of community, in terms of collaboration, working together for a greater good, a very firm social contract. And you don't always hear about how they do on your behalf, but I really want to tell you and to celebrate and acknowledge that the Canadians that go out into the world from the physiotherapy community are wonderful. They are fantastic representatives of you and of the community, and you should be immensely proud of their contribution. They serve you and your community incredibly well. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge that, because we don't always get a chance to say thank you and well done. So thank you and well done. You've given us two presidents, Doreen Moore and AJ Fernando. You've given us two chairs of our International Scientific Committee. Liz Harrison and Dina Brooks is our incoming chair, and also a very active International Scientific Committee member who's sitting right here in front of me, Patty Solomon. You've also obviously given us our fantastic Executive Director, Secretary General, Brenda Myers, who's been with us for 20 years. You gave us two fabulous congresses, let me tell you. I was at one of them in Vancouver, and that was wonderful. And you've also gifted us members of our executive committee. The top award in WCPT is the Mildred Elson Award, and Joan Walker was the recipient of that, and Joan is here as well. Now, I know many other parts of the world would claim Joan, but she is here, and she is yours. And these are just some of the examples, some of the wonderful people who have contributed to our community. I'd also like to point out Tyler, who's sitting in the middle there, Tyler Milton. Tyler is the North America Caribbean representative on a really exciting group called WCPT Future, which I encourage you, if you're a student or early career PT, to join in. So that's great that you're here. And WCPT makes its own awards. And we give our awards at the general meeting and Congress, which was obviously in Singapore a few months ago. It feels like about 20 years ago, I have to tell you. And Mike Landry received an award from WCPT, but it was given in his absence because Mike was in Nepal. And in a way, that is what we know about Mike and what we love about Mike is his commitment to international humanitarian work. And Mike received the WCPT Award, the International Service Award. Mike has been... And so normally, of course, we don't get a chance to give the award to the person when they're not there. But this is just perfect because we do have a chance to give Mike his award here. Many of you know Mike, but for those of you who don't, Mike has been a champion and an advocate of physiotherapy and physical therapy for 20 years. And he has worked in areas of disaster, humanitarian crisis, areas that have been post-war, and the challenges to communities that war and civil strife has produced. His focus has been on global health and rehabilitation and health services research. And Mike was an assistant professor at the University of Toronto before he was wooed to the United States, where he took up his position as the chief of the Division of Physical Therapy and leads on the DPT program at Duke University. And I've no doubt he'll come back to you. He's on loan to the United States. He was the head of the international division, the International Health Division of the Canadian Physiotherapy Association, and indeed was your president between 2008 and 2010. Mike has worked around the world. I know of the times that he was in Bosnia. I know of his work in Haiti in the period of time after the earthquake, and I know that the week after next, he is going back to Nepal at the request of WHO to lead on the response that will have to take place there in order to manage the horrors that have been delivered on the community in Nepal. He is absolutely wonderful, and he is also a friend of mine, and I guess I should declare that straight away. But I was a neutral chair of the awards committee, and nobody on the committee was in any doubt that Mike was an absolutely worthy recipient of the WCPT International Service Award. So please join me in recognizing Mike Landry. I bet you thought I was never going to stop.
Great, thank you, Emma. That's great, and congratulations, Dr. Landry, for this achievement. I just want to share a personal note on regarding Mike. As you picked up in this, that Mike was en route to Singapore to participate in WCPT and to receive his award, and so en route he redirected and answered a need in Nepal. So again, just an amazing story. But once we received word that Mike was altering his course and off to Nepal, the delegates that approached the Canadian delegation with well wishes and best wishes for Michael were just it was just a constant barrage of people asking us to send Mike, all the blessings when he was there. So you were thought of quite often throughout WCPT. So thanks, Mike. As you can imagine, it takes months of planning and effort from many people to get to this day. Over the past year, the planning teams for this event have been working hard to ensure Congress meets or exceeds your expectations, given the investment of time and financial resources to attend. CPA is blessed to have the support of many volunteers from across Canada. Congress simply would not and could not happen without you. We are indebted to our many volunteers who are in such numbers, making individual recognition difficult. I would ask that the members of the Congress Planning, Education, and Abstract Review Committees to please stand and accept the gratitude of the Congress delegates. It is my pleasure to offer recognition to those who have provided tremendous support to Congress 2015 through their sponsorship contributions. We could not be successful without them, and ask that you show your appreciation for our sponsors. And again, thanks to all these associations and organizations for support of Congress and our association. And now, again, it's always just a privilege all the way through this evening or this afternoon to invite really special people up. And Dr. Sandy Rene is definitely a special friend and a special friend to all of us in CPA. And I'd like to invite Rene or Sandy up to the stage to introduce our platinum sponsor, which is PureCare.
Thank you very much, Doug, and welcome everybody. I just can't tell you how good it is to be back in Nova Scotia. Oh my God. I am going to come back forever. PureCare is our platinum sponsor. PureCare started as a small family business in 1997 in Edmonton. The owner was then Rick Houghton, who had moved to Edmonton from England. The company was housed in a 500 square foot office, and initially they sold TENS and NMES units to retail stores and to physiotherapy clinics. Today, PureCare is owned by one of Rick's sons, Barry Houghton. Barry, would you stand up, please? Barry changed, as president and CEO, changed a little mom and pop organization into a national and global company. Today, they have customers across Canada with offices and warehouses in Richmond, BC, Calgary, Alberta, and Brampton, Ontario. They have suppliers from the US, England, and Mexico, and they have manufacturing facilities in 14 countries internationally. They import 4 exclusive brands of physiotherapy products and have accumulated $15 million in sales since Barry became president and CEO in 2007. But besides selling physiotherapy equipment and supplies across Canada, PureCare has moved in a direction that is aimed at helping the profession of physiotherapy by renting, loaning, and donating physiotherapy equipment to university physiotherapy programs, by making donations to various student-led initiatives, to physiotherapist-led initiatives, and to profession-led initiatives, and by becoming a platinum sponsor for CPA Congress here in Halifax. This is a $15,000 commitment to be a platinum sponsor. So you may be wondering why I'm up here. Why am I introducing PureCare as our platinum sponsor? Well, PureCare President and CEO Barry Houghton asked me to do this introduction based on the fact that we've known each other for nearly 20 years. It all started back in 1997 when they first opened shop in Edmonton, and I was one of their first customers. I was teaching electrophysical agents at the University of Alberta in the School of Physiotherapy, and we had just lost one of our most beloved colleagues and entrepreneurs, David Culverhouse. David owned a company called Electromed Services, and he supplied equipment and service across the prairies. David was renowned for being helpful in any way, shape, or form. To him, sales came second. It was service that came first. After David died, his company dissolved. I had service needs for the University of Alberta for our equipment. So I reached out to Rick, and I fondly remember going to their little store in southeast Edmonton, this little 500 square foot shop, meeting Rick, his 4 sons, and their daughter, all doing various jobs around the company. Physiotherapists would often call me and ask me where to buy equipment. And because of their excellent service, I would recommend PureCare. But it's a competitive market out there, so I would always include other companies in my recommendation so that the consumers would always have a choice. Interestingly enough, many, many times they chose PureCare. I left Edmonton in 2004, and since that time, PureCare has grown and expanded. And as I mentioned earlier, they have moved in a direction that is so helpful to our profession. Certainly, they are not the only company that helps the physiotherapy profession. So do the other sponsors. But they have facilitated access to equipment and supplies to universities, hospitals, and clinics, but they've done so with a great deal of pride and passion and honesty. Today, they become the first Canadian-owned small business to become a platinum sponsor for CPA in many, many years. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of thanks to PureCare.
Thank you, Dr. Renee, and PureCare for your support, Barry. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Michael Brennan, our Chief Executive Officer, to come up and say a few words. Michael.
Thank you. Great job. Good evening, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here and to share Congress with you. First of all, I want to start by saying, first of all, I want to start by thanking Emma for those very, very gracious words. It is no toil at all for us to represent CPA on the international stage, and it's the right thing to do to support the mission of the WCPT. So Emma and Brenda, great job, and you have our full support in the years to come. Thank you. So, first of all, a great announcement is we've topped 630 Congress participants here in Halifax. That's a great number, yeah. So that's the largest number of attendees since 2009 in Calgary, so way to go, Halifax. Wonderful job. So I always am surprised at how we attract year after year younger and younger delegates. I don't know exactly how that works, but it's nice to see so many young faces here. That is how that works, right? They're getting younger? Yeah, great, good. Nice to know. So as you've noticed, those of you who've attended Congress over the last few years, we continue to experiment with the Congress model. As with any institution, we have to modernize with the times, we have to continue to grow, we have to make sure that we're fulfilling the needs of people who attend, because it's a lot to ask to come to Congress. It's a commitment of time, a commitment of resources, and we have to make sure that we're serving the needs of our full community. That means preserving the best traditions, the best ideas, including the bagpipes. But it also means trying new things, experimenting, having the courage to innovate, recognize what works, and change what doesn't. So to that end, as Doug encouraged you, I would encourage you to continue using the social media tools that we are promoting, our Twitter feed, at PhysioCan, hashtag Congress, and so on. And let us know what you like. Let us know what you think we can do better for the next time. In that vein, we have, as Doug pointed out, we have volunteers all throughout Congress, and our CPA staff, that you'll notice them from the badges, as well as our colleagues for the 10th year now from Sea to Sky. So if you have any issues, any worries, any challenges, please look us up. We're here to help you. We're here to make sure that you get the best Congress experience possible. So some of the innovative ideas that we're trying again this year and bringing back, Doug mentioned, we've got the auditor's desk, and what an uplifting event that was last year. Some truly passionate and innovative leaders in the community showing what's best about physiotherapy. So I'd urge you to come out to that. We have our rapid fire posters. We have our 2 minutes, 2 slides, our TED Talks, and so much more. So if you can't find something interesting over the next 2.5 days, it's probably because you're enjoying the sunshine. So let's get the weather committee to maybe turn that down a little bit. Again, my thanks to all of the committees who've made this a real success and a real compelling few days of education. If you haven't done so already, I would encourage you to use our app. So it's available in the various app stores, Android and iPhone and so on. And just simply download the Guidebook app and then search for CPA Congress 2015. And there's a whole bunch of rich information there and very easy tools to use social media. We are also here to support our foundation. The PFC has been around since the mid-'80s, and it's done a superb job in distributing over $1.4 million to researchers, young researchers across Canada through scholarships and bursaries. So this year we have a number of PFC events that we'd love for you to attend and support. Friday evening at 6:15 sharp at the Delta, because we're bussing you out, we have the Nordic Pole Walk and our fun run. Saturday we have our live auction, and just a note, we are moving the live auction from the boat to dry land. And so we expect that's going to mean more people and more bidding, and we're probably going to make sure that the bar's been open a little bit extra time so that those bids go up. And we've changed our awards format a little bit. So we're going to do our PFC awards. Some of them will be presented tomorrow morning, our general awards, and our division-sponsored awards are actually going to be presented by the divisions themselves in each one of their events. And we think that's a great way for the division members to actually recognize who they're supporting. So I'd encourage you to participate in your division events. To that end, we're trying something new, which we're calling division socials. So for this evening and tomorrow evening, look in your Congress app or your guidebook, you'll see the various divisions and their events, and those are tied into their AGMs. So we'd encourage you to participate in those. Finally, last thing is, as Doug mentioned, support for our sponsors and our exhibitors is very important. We do a long exhibit hall access hours. Some congresses like this, they make it very short and almost impossible for you to engage with those exhibitors. I encourage you, please spend some time in the exhibit hall, get to know each one of the exhibitors. I'll put a special plug in for Photo. That's our electronic outcome measures partner. It's a wonderful tool and a wonderful program, and we feel that it's going to be a very, very important service for you, and it's going to be a very important tool for our profession as we progress. So please visit the exhibit hall and spend some time there. Finally, last but not least, I want to talk about Local Flavor Night. It is a legendary event. If you have not attended CPA Local Flavor Night, first of all, dress casually, dress comfortably, because there is a very high bar of engagement. Wallflowers need not attend the Local Flavor Night. So it will be at the harbor. As you know, there is a boat tour. There's limited spacing on the boat tour. We've actually had more people attend Congress than we expected. So we don't mean to discourage anyone, but it's first come, first serve for those who want to do the boat tour. Those who wish to stay on dry land will have access to refreshments, and obviously we'll get the auction started as soon as the boat comes back. But most of all, you are there to dance. That's your job. We have a reputation to uphold. And we have Halifax's own Big Fish as our entertainment. I hear they're awesome. So with that, I will simply invite you all to have a really good time over the next 3 days. Keep up the great reputation of physiotherapy as the #1 party profession, and enjoy Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I would like now to invite Carol Richards to the stage to introduce the 2015 Enid Graham Memorial Lecturer, Dr. Mindy Levin, and so Carol Richards.
Mr. President, Madam President-elect of CPA, Madam President of WCPT, Honorable Minister, previous Enid Graham recipients, members of the Board of Directors of CPA, honored guests, Mesdames et Messieurs. I have the honor and the privilege of introducing to you the 33rd Enid Graham Memorial Lecture Award recipient, Dr. Mindy Levin, whom I have known since she started to learn about PT and I started to learn about teaching. C'est un honneur pour moi de vous présenter aujourd'hui la Dr. Mindy Levin, que je connais depuis qu'elle a commencé ses études à l'Université McGill et que moi, j'ai commencé à apprendre à enseigner. Je vais continuer ma présentation en anglais, mais j'ai préparé des diapositives et vous allez pouvoir suivre l'essentiel de mes propos sur les diapositives. Allow me to briefly give you a summary of Dr. Levin's accomplishment. Dr. Levin is currently a professor in the School of Physical and Occupational Therapy at McGill University. She is also an adjunct professor in the Faculty of Social Welfare and Health Sciences, the University of Haifa, and the Department of Physical Therapy, Tel Aviv University. She is director of the Sensory Motor Control and Virtual Reality Laboratory at the Jewish Rehabilitation Hospital site of the Centre de Recherche Interdisciplinaire en Réadaptation du Montréal Métropolitain, called the CREER. And she is the third McGill professor to receive this award since the inaugural one given to Mrs. Helen Galt in 1981. Let me tell you a bit about her trajectory. She's a graduate of McGill in physical therapy, and then she practiced in Montreal as a clinical therapist before she returned to do her studies in clinical sciences at the University of Montreal, and then for a PhD in physiology at McGill University. She then, at the time, did something that was not usual. She continued on to postdoctoral studies. She went to the Neurologische Therapiezentrum Düsseldorf, Germany, for 4 months, and that's where she met her husband. And then she returned and did graduate work, postdoctoral work at the University of Montreal in the Neurological Science Research Center. Her excellent academic record was rewarded by scholarship awards at all levels of her research studies. And I'd like to note that she received scholarships from the Physiotherapy Foundation of Canada and the Quebec Corporation of Physical Therapists to get her started on her master's work. She then took up a research position at the University of Montreal, and she was what we call a chercheur boursier, which is a research scholar, for 12 years, Junior 1, Junior 2, and Senior, which is very unusual to be able to continue to be a research scholar funded by the Quebec Health Scholarship, or we call it the Fonds de Recherche du Québec, for 12 years. It's really something that should be mentioned as a very particular achievement. And then in 1997, she became interim director of the Research Center of the Institut de Réadaptation de Montréal. She then crossed the mountain and went to McGill University. And from 2008 to 2004, 2008 was director of physical therapy and associate director in the School of Physical and Occupational Therapy at McGill. She became a full professor in 2009. And since 2003, she is a member of the Career Research Center. And believe it or not, since 1985, she has maintained a small private physiotherapy practice and acted as a consultant to a community exercise center. Now, I'd like to emphasize that Mindy is one of the rare physical therapists who holds a Canada Research Chair. And I've taken the liberty of showing you an excerpt from the Canada Research Chair's website. She became a Tier 1, which means senior, and it's 4 years, in 2005, and it was renewed in 2012, and it will last until 2019. This is a major award to the university. And I'd like to just mention what it says on the site. She holds this chair in motor recovery and rehabilitation, and as a Canada Research Chair in arm and hand rehabilitation, she studies how the motor system is altered following brain damage and what are the best techniques to help the brain recovery arm and hand function. In her lab, they are developing and studying treatment approaches for arm and hand rehabilitation caused by neurological problems that affect movement control. These approaches include intensive training programs, such as those that force the motor system to move in specific patterns, as well as new techniques such as playing games in virtual reality environments. I thought I'd take the time to really explain what Mindy does. Mindy the researcher. Mindy is recognized internationally as one of Canada's foremost researchers in physiotherapy, rehabilitation, and human motor control. In terms of, the usual metrics, she has published 114 peer-reviewed papers, submitted 6 others, written in collaboration with others, of course, 20 book chapters, short papers, editorials, and 323 published abstracts. Her research projects have been continuously funded since she started her work. I noted 69 large and small grants obtained from federal and provincial granting agencies, as well as foundations, alone or in collaboration for her own projects or as a mentor of research teams. She has multiple collaborative projects with researchers in other universities in Canada and internationally, such as France, India, Israel, and Sweden. She has, unbelievably, 140 invited lectures. Of these, 96 outside of Canada in 22 different countries. She has participated in the organizations of meetings and symposia in various functions, for 41 in all, and of these, 29 internationally. She is editor-in-chief of the Journal of Motor Control and is on, or was, on an editorial board member of 4 other journals. She also has been editor or co-editor of 4 books, and I just show you 2 as an example. First, Virtual Reality Technologies for Health and Clinical Applications, 2014, and another one on skill learning, performance, health, and injury. Mindy is a dedicated mentor. PhD student knows her as a patient, kind, supportive, and genuinely helpful mentor who continues to counsel many students even after they have completed their work with her. She has trained 9 postdoctoral fellows, 3 currently. Some are from countries such as Sweden, Israel, Russia, and the States. 15 PhD candidates, 5 currently. Master's students and research practicums as well. She has been invited to teach physiotherapy students or physiotherapists in at least 6 different countries: Brazil, England, India, Israel, Sweden, and New Zealand, and medical doctors in China. She has participated in several physiotherapy conference workshops and in summer school programs in neurosciences. And allow me to say that, for example, for the International Society of Motor Control, 10 different summers. She's a member of the American Congress of Rehabilitation Mentoring Group, and she is an international mentor with the Global Bridges Program in collaboration with the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. These are just 3 examples of the courses that Mindy has taught. The first, motor control, a short course, 14 hours, to medical doctors in China. Second, short course on motor control to 110 undergraduate and graduate physiotherapists in India. And the third, a short course in motor control to the Association of Chartered Physiotherapists interested in neurology in England. Let me now turn to Mindy's contributions to the development of physiotherapy as a clinical science. She's a founding member of the International Society of Motor Control and was president from 2005 to 2007. She's a founding member of the International Society of Virtual Rehabilitation and currently serves as vice president. She's a founding member of the International Neurological Physiotherapy Association of the WCPT. She's an international consultant to France for handicap problems. She's an invited panel member on neuroplasticity in the 3-Step Summer Institute of Translating Evidence into Practice, in a 3-step. She's been invited to participate in consensus-type conference or task forces, such as the National Institutes of Health Task Force on Childhood Movement Disorders, Canadian Institutes of Health Mobility Conference, Canadian Stroke Network Best Practices Recommendations, and is a member of the International Upper Extremity Stroke Think Tank. And she is chairman of the Scientific Committee of the Physiotherapy Foundation of Canada and has contributed greatly to the Quebec Rehabilitation Research Network, known as REPAR, as a member of the Scientific Committee, as chair of the stroke team, and as a member of the working group on the rehabilitation research financing. Just a note, this is Mindy at WCPT, telling the world what we do in Canada for natural knowledge translation. And there was one quote in particular that I liked. It takes people, she says, it takes a whole village to do good research and to create the dialogue. Let me just tell you a few awards and impact statements. She has received awards from the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada 3 different times. She has been named the Outstanding Neurorehabilitation Clinical Scientist of the American Society of Neurorehabilitation, Education, and Research Foundation, and gave the 2014 Geraldine Pelliccia Memorial Lecture at the University of Connecticut. Her publications have provided countless physiotherapists with the latest findings related to the assessment and treatment of disturbed motor control, thereby facilitating evidence-informed practice. I now give you 2 citations. Dr. Annette Mannheimer, the Associate Dean of the School of P&OT at McGill, says, Mindy's contributions to the advancement of knowledge in the rehabilitation sciences are substantial and important. And Stephen Wolf from the University of Emory in Atlanta, Georgia, has said, when one examines the chronology of her curriculum vitae, it becomes readily apparent that she is always thinking about the future and creative ways in which we can blend contemporary discoveries with our roles as physiotherapists. In summary, Dr. Levin is dedicated to the advancement of the physiotherapy profession and the development and application of evidence to promote best practices. She has led a team of researchers that has generated a rigorous body of scientific knowledge that has enhanced the evidence base of neurological physiotherapy practice worldwide. She has taught and mentored many of the next generation of physiotherapy scientists in Canada and in many other countries. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mindy Levin, an international ambassador of evidence-based neurological physiotherapy.
Where's my talk? Somebody took my talk. Carol? Carol, I think you took my talk. My talk? Give me. Wow. Now I know why, Sandy, last year when you got the Enneagram, you went, he said, oh my God. And now I know why. Thank you, Carol, for those kind words. I honestly don't know who that person was or how they had the time to do all of that. Wow. Anyway, I am extremely honored, as you can imagine, to stand before you today in acknowledgement of the Enneagram founder. I have to, sorry. Okay. So I'm going to start off with talking about Enneagram, who helped establish the first physiotherapy programs in Toronto and in Montreal, and who was highly esteemed, creative, and an indefatigable promoter of the profession of physical therapy. I am absolutely humbled by this award, and I am awed by the distinguished list of 32 previous award winners who are giants all in physiotherapy, and I thank you to be even considered to be part of your group. That's to say thank you. All I can say is thank you and thank you and thank you very much. And a special thank you, of course, to the people who considered me worthy of this award, the nominating committee at McGill University, headed by Matthew Hunt and Carol Richards, and of course the members of the CPA Awards Committee. Back up. Okay, already messed up. Sorry. Little nervous. When I started to contemplate what I would talk about in this presentation, I was faced with a dilemma. I'm used to presenting the results of my research to various audiences, from neuroscientists to clinicians to stakeholders, not to mention to students in many different venues in hot and cold countries all over the world. And I'm also used to teaching at the undergraduate and graduate levels, topics related to neurophysiology, neurology, motor control, and electrotherapy. But I'm not used to talking about myself at all. And in fact, in my scientific career, I go to great lengths not to use the I word. I might trip over the I word a few times, actually, because I really am not used to presenting in this kind of venue. And I've also gone to great lengths to teach my students to avoid using first-person language in their presentations and publications. So anyway, but I still thought that I would present to you the highlights of my journey in physiotherapy and in physiotherapy research, and in the process of identifying the evidence for what we do every day in physiotherapy practice. This process led to a learning experience for me as I began to identify some of the common elements and motivating factors behind the choices that I've made during my career. Everyone has special reasons for wanting to be a physiotherapist. I knew that I wanted to be a physiotherapist from a very early age. My decision was inspired by two factors. The first factor was Auntie Evelyn. Now, she was a very special person. See, my family, my mother was the youngest of 9 children from an immigrant family from Tsarist Russia who came to Canada at the turn of the 20th century. One of my mother's older sisters, Evelyn, contracted multiple sclerosis. And together with the family and a small group of volunteers, Evelyn founded the Montreal Association for Multiple Sclerosis in 1948, which later became the MS Society of Canada. As a young girl, the slide is not up. Excuse me, the slide is not up. Have all the slides not been up? This is my best slide. Okay, there she is. But as a young girl, I participated in all kinds of fundraisers like tag days and bazaars and teas and other fundraising events. And I had the dubious accomplishment of being able to say multiple sclerosis before I was 10. And I think it was, I got the most money in my little cans of, because of that. They said, can you say that word again? They didn't really believe that. But I also had the opportunity to listen to my aunt, because every Sunday she sort of held court, and we were all there. And we came to her bedroom, and we sat around, and we listened to her counsel everybody. She was solving our problems all the time. And she was counseling also MSers and their families from her bed, using her specially adapted, state-of-the-art telephone headset with a dial pad which she could only manipulate with the index finger of her right hand. I didn't know it then about the greater importance of the work that she and my family were doing, only that she was a great inspiration to me, someone who, despite her veritable handicap, could be so optimistic and encouraging to others about how to succeed in life. My second special reason for wanting to become a physical therapist was a story recounted to me by my older cousin, Gloria, pictured here on the right. Gloria Anchard Gilbert, sitting here, who came all the way from London, Ontario, to listen to me. She was already a physiotherapy student, senior student, working at the Institut de Réadaptation, the Rehabilitation Institute of Montreal. And it was the time of the thalidomide crisis. Sitting at our kitchen table, Gloria told me about her efforts to elicit voluntary movement from the residual limbs of a young girl. She said that after many sessions with this child, she finally was able to evoke the desired movement, which would necessarily give this child the ability to use her limb for functional activity and even use a prosthetic limb. I mean, this was a really major event and truly inspired me. I saw the dedication that Gloria had and still has, being a 2011 life member of CPA, and the potential benefits and rewards of this great profession. So I must say that I was kind of single-minded, and when my peers and colleagues were listening to the Rolling Stones and Nancy Sinatra, they were struggling to decide what to do. I already knew that I wanted to be a physio, and that was my only aspiration. But before I started telling you about my journey, I have to tell you something about Montreal. So this is Montreal from the air. This is where my story takes place, and the name Montreal may be related to an actual mountain. There's some controversy about that. Well, a hill. It's not really a mountain. Okay. So it's outlined here in the colored lines, and the downtown area is up in the right upper area, and then next to the St. Lawrence River. And what's important to my story is the location of two universities on this island. McGill is located here, on the downtown side, and the Université de Montréal is located here, on the other side of the mountain. So I set out to climb the mountain and to become a physiotherapist at McGill, starting in 1973. Located in a historical building in downtown Montreal, I was privileged to know and to be taught by outstanding mentors of the day, including 3 former Ina Graham awardees, Helen Galt, Sharon Wood-Daphne, Carol Richards, as well as a lifetime member, Edith Aston McCrimmon. And after 3 years at McGill, I evolved into a physiotherapist. And I learned to use the physical therapy voice, which Sandy Rennie seems to use really well. I worked at the Institut de Réadaptation Montréal in pediatrics, spinal cord injury, and stroke. And during this time, I was also involved in other activities, like sports medicine. There he is again, Sandy Rennie. I made my first foray into the national activities as a Quebec representative of the Sports Physiotherapy Division of the CPA, SPD it was called then. And I remember Sandy Rennie and Chuck and Liz and Arliss all getting up at 6 in the morning to go running. I go, what are they doing? Like, oh, it wasn't for me. But they did that at every single meeting, so I finally got used to it. But they were very inspirational, and we had lots of good times building the early years of the sports division. But I also had a foray into other things. My interest took me into the domain of industry, in which I helped design a special wheelchair and seatbelt system for transporting people in wheelchairs through the narrow airplane aisles for the now defunct Canadian Pacific Airlines. But my first interest was neurology, still is neurology, and at that time, in neurological practice, the focus was on the reduction of impairment, which seems to be actually coming full circle, is coming around again. And the relationship between motor impairment and motor deficits, movement deficits, wasn't very clear. And I wasn't satisfied with not knowing what that relationship was. I had more questions than there were answers for about motor recovery in neurological patients. The profession was just beginning its quest for evidence. Here is the current definition of evidence-informed practice found on the CPA website. The statement says that physiotherapists use evidence-informed practice to guide decisions about patient care, and evidence-informed practice integrates the best available evidence and clinical expertise with the patient's needs and values to ensure delivery of best practice. It has application to individual patient care, practice management, and the application or development of health policy. But what kind of evidence are we talking about here in this term? I think that deserves a little attention. Here I've listed two types of evidence that pertain to physiotherapy practice. The first is evidence for the effectiveness of a particular intervention to improve a specific functional outcome. So in clinical trials parlance, this can be likened to testing the effectiveness of a capsule or a treatment like constraint-induced therapy that includes a lot of different other little ingredients. But you're not looking at the little ingredients, you're just looking at the bigger picture, and you're looking at a major outcome like arm functional ability, which also is maybe composed of a lot of little things. The second level is a little more analytical, and it's evidence for the inclusion of a particular training element, like the number of repetitions of a certain exercise, how many ways you give feedback, for example, and looking at those on the effect of the bigger treatment. So the rest of my talk will focus on this question. The world of the 80s was not as complex as it is today, but the barriers that we commonly call knowledge translation were still very prevalent then. If the gap between basic science and clinical practice is large now, it was huge then. Also, there was only a handful of movement specialists, like physiotherapists, involved in fundamental motor control research. I decided that I needed more answers than I had previously learned in my clinical training, and so I put on my stuff and I headed over that mountain again to begin graduate studies at the Université de Montréal. Under the tutelage of Elaine Chapman and Bertrand Arsenault, I had the opportunity to read physiology and evaluate how changed peripheral sensory information after spinal cord injury influenced reflex function. I had to learn everything. It's like I knew nothing, tabula rasa. Everything about electrophysiology, reflex pathways, and spinal cord anatomy. I learned how to electrically evoke H reflexes in the calf, which probably is why they targeted me to teach electrotherapy since then, and I still do. I learned quite a bit from my first two mentors, to whom I'm eternally grateful, including, much to my surprise, that I didn't know how to read and write scientific literature. And this decidedly is one of the largest problems, the first hurdles of graduate school, which my students all have to learn. So after my MSc, I headed over the mountain again, always going to begin graduate studies at McGill. And in 1985, there was no PhD program in rehab science that I think was mentioned earlier. The first programs were inaugurated in 1988 at McGill and in 1992 in Alberta. Therefore, I enrolled in the Department of Physiology, but I still had the opportunity to work with Christina Hui Chen, who was then the head of the School of Physical and Occupational Therapy. Christina was a superb mentor. She was an outstanding role model for hard work and dedication. Under her mentorship, I learned several important lessons, such as thinking a problem through and making an airtight argument so nobody could paint a bullseye on you and shoot you. Okay, so you have to really be able to argue yourself right down to the bottom. My first PhD study allowed me to continue learning about reflex function, and in one of my PhD papers shown here, we showed that 3 weeks of TENS stimulation, shown here by the black bars, it's measuring spasticity, you see it's decreasing, It had a cumulative effect on reducing plantar flexor spasticity in patients with chronic stroke compared to placebo stimulation, which is shown by the white bars. But of particular interest was that the decrease in spasticity was accompanied by an immediate increase in dorsiflexion force, even though we didn't do any training at all for the dorsiflexors. And that suggested that the previous limitation of dorsiflexor force production was related to the presence of spasticity in the antagonists. This is an important implication for physiotherapy practice and evidence that the presence of spasticity in one muscle group affects the force production in the opposite muscle group, which might seem obvious to you, but it was actually, now we could show that that actually occurred. My PhD studies instilled in me an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. There was so much that I didn't know about the control of movement in the healthy system, and even less about motor disorders and recovery of normal movement in the damaged system. So, put on the boots and continued my study once more on the other side of the mountain. A major question about motor control is the role of sensory information in movement production. This is one of the questions that I addressed in my postdoctoral studies with Dr. Yves Lamar and Anatole Feldman. Dr. Lamar, a neuroscientist and practicing Montreal neurologist, had a special patient, GL. She's pictured here. GL had suffered 2 episodes of Guillain-Barré syndrome, the second one leaving her deafferented from the neck down. This is large fiber deafferentation with no tactile information and very little vibration, with diminished temperature and pricking. It's not called pricking, but anyway. This rare situation had only occurred in 2 or 3 other people in the world. Really, she's really one of 2 or 3 people in the world. And she became somewhat of a celebrity patient. And she was shuttled from lab to lab all over the world so that experts could study her very unique system firsthand. Some of the questions people were trying to address were, at that time, and perhaps even still, is there a separate central control system for movement production, one that does not rely on sensory information? In other words, if we don't have sensory information, can we still move? And she was the kind of person that you needed to study that. And what exactly is the role of sensory information on the production of movement? And how does sensory information combine with vestibular information to maintain upright stability? In my studies with GL, we provided convincing evidence that in a human system, sensory information was essential for making accurate movements, even in the presence of vision. So vision was not enough. Vision alone was not enough, which is important for the understanding of training approaches in sensory motor recovery. So after 2 years of postdoctoral research, I found myself again on the other side of that mountain as a research science at the School of École de Réadaptation of the Université Montréal. Thanks to support from the Quebec Health Research Fund that Carol already mentioned, I was able to devote the majority of my time to establishment of my research lab, attraction of students, and conducting rehabilitation research. It was hard setting out on my own. In the early 90s, there were still very few people with doctoral degrees in rehabilitation science, and rehabilitation research has not found its niche in funding domain either, often falling between the cracks within the provincial and federal funding agencies. It was a struggle, but nobody gets anywhere alone. I have been lucky in my career to have had several outstanding mentors, only 2 of whom I will mention here. One, who needs no introduction, is Carol Richards. Carol has been a remarkable mentor to me throughout all of my career. Whenever I was in a tough spot or needed some advice, Carol was always there, even before the cell phones and the internet and the email. You could actually phone her on the phone and talk to her. She was and remains encouraging, kind, and visionary. Carol always knew where I was going and how to get there, even before I did. And she went out of her way to get me there. Carol, I always knew you were there for me to put in a good word. You were always at my back, and I sincerely thank you for it. And I have aspired throughout my career to be as good of a mentor to others as you have been to me. Thank you. Another person who's been an important role model to me and mentor has been Anatol Feldman. Arriving in Canada from the Soviet Union in 1989, he became not only my scientific mentor, but also my lifelong partner. I quickly gained a deep knowledge of physiology and neuroscience, often by having to translate what Anatol had written in English into English. I have been blessed to have had the opportunity to know this outstanding scientist, a person who has taught me how to think out of the box and not to be afraid of expressing ideas that go against the conventional norm. Thank you, Anatol. Okay, let's get back to the evidence then. So one of the meetings I went to with Anatol, I was at this meeting, and I found myself going to lots of meetings that I normally wouldn't have gone to, like motor control, biomechanics, kinesiology, ecological psychology, NACEP meetings, sports meetings, everything. Admittedly, I was one of the very few physiotherapists who went to meetings like that. And at one of these meetings, the speaker was describing which muscles of the arm were activated during a simple reaching movement. Well, they mentioned the deltoids, the biceps, and the triceps. I thought that was rather trivial, but something that everybody analyzing movement would intuitively know. However, it was the next finding that was even more surprising. The speaker announced with some excitement that they had discovered that the shoulder girdle muscles also contracted with the reaching movement, even though these muscles were remote from the prime mover. I didn't know how to react. Of course, it was obvious to any physiotherapist that movements involved agonists, antagonists, and synergists. But as I realized, maybe not exactly then, but a little bit later, that it wasn't really enough to just know that. You had to prove it. You had to provide the evidence. And the evidence consisted of concrete, empirical, repeatable observations presented in an objective way, even though they might have seemed obvious. We need still a lot of evidence for this, objective evidence in physiotherapy. And even though something might seem obvious, it's still important to document it using objective and controlled outcome measures. And I think we are really onto that, and that's where we really need to go. I realized there was quite a lot of evidence that still needs to be documented and that it was time to get on my way. But studying movement is not so simple. Although we have very good descriptions of movements of all kinds, how we interpret these data critically depends on our underlying assumptions about the control of movement. And the first question is, what is normal movement? And if I asked you to actually reflect on that for a few minutes, you might find it very difficult to define. Only once we can answer this question can we even start to understand what is abnormal movement, or whether we have to ask the question in a completely different way. So I'm going to bring you through a little bit of normal movement, not a lot, just a sort of smattering, just to give you an idea of the size of this problem. One of the major problems in motor control is the question of redundancy. Simply put, the musculoskeletal system has more muscles and joints than it needs to perform any given movement. The system is redundant. This problem was formulated by Nikolai Bernstein in the 30s. And the principle of redundancy describes an important feature of movement, that there's no ideal or optimal movement path when we perform a given task, but that every time we move, there is a unique solution to the redundancy problem, and every time we move, the path we use or the movement we make is slightly different from the last one. There's no perfect movement. So here's an example of somebody trying to touch their nose, and you have 7 different ways of doing it, but actually the number is infinite, and this is only based on 7 degrees of freedom of the arm. And then if you include the scapula, the back, all the other degrees of freedom, the number becomes even more enormous. this flexibility is not necessarily a bad thing. It proposes a problem to the nervous system of how to solve the problem of which degrees of freedom to use at any particular time. But it also allows the system a lot of abundance. So it allows the system to adapt to fatigue or injury or other situations that occur, and allows the system to find a new way of doing something to solve the problem a different way. So why is this particular principle important? Physical therapy practice aims to maximize the functional capacity of the individual described within a conceptual framework of the ICF. Combined with the ICF model, our model of practice combines clinical reasoning and clinical informed practice to identify hypotheses on which treatments can be based. What is equally important, however, is the incorporation of motor control and motor learning theory into this scenario. And that goes for neuro as well as ortho and cardio-resp, and in all of the fields that we are acting in order to provide a framework for assumptions about normal and abnormal movement, neuroplasticity, and functional recovery. In my first sole-authored paper in 1996, I recorded movement kinematics, or arm movements, in patients with different degrees of stroke severity. The hypothesis was that movements in patients with stroke would be characterized by limited redundancy. You sort of thought, well, okay, they can't move at all, they're stuck to the same movement pattern, and they lack redundancy. But it was found that the ability to use redundancy was actually preserved after CNS damage, as you can see here on the bottom. Nope, this is not working. Okay. Okay, you can see the lines here are pretty straight because this is the endpoint path, and it means that the same patterns are being used over and over again for reaching a target placed far from the body. But this one is kind of less straight, and called jerky if you want. But it also shows that you can get to the same point using different ways. And so the patient was able to find different ways to get to the point. He could use his own redundancy. And he did that by also using different joint rotations, which is shown on the right. So, in other words, so he had difficulty combining 2 degrees of freedom to reach the target, and used other degrees of freedom to adapt that movement, or to make the movement so that he could still get the finger to the end point, to make as smooth and straight hand path as he could. So it appeared that the deficit was the loss of coordination between the joints. He couldn't get the joints to do exactly the same as the other side did. So in this paper published in 2000, we started to address the question of why arm movements made into certain parts of the workspace, the joint space, were more difficult than others. And it wasn't enough to explain this descriptively by saying that there's muscle weakness or that there's spasticity present. We looked at how the damaged nervous system was able to regulate where in joint space a muscle was activated during voluntary movement. Based on this motor control concept of threshold regulation, we mapped out the joint space of active range control, shown here in 3 patients by the gray shaded areas in each graph, where the elbow flexors are shown on the top and the elbow extensor shown on the bottom. And this is the profile of the torque produced in the muscle and the range of motion that torque is distributed around. So the patient on the left has a mild stroke, and he has a lot of torque that he can produce throughout the whole range of motion. And the patient on the right has a much more limited space in which he can produce any torque. And these spaces, we found, were delimited by the threshold, the point at which the muscle started to be active in space, or the threshold regulation. So based on these fundamental studies, we created a new clinical measure of spasticity that identifies the joint angle at which spasticity begins to appear in a muscle. So not how much resistance there is, but where that resistance starts to occur. And our studies suggested that the measure may be more sensitive and reliable than the current measures of muscle resistance, or maybe can be combined with our current measures. And this represents a direct transfer of basic science knowledge about pathophysiology to clinical practice in spasticity assessment. The knowledge about spasticity thresholds led to even more questions about the origin of the deficit in reaching movements in patients with stroke. In this study, we described how the trunk was used to compensate for deficits in reaching. An important conclusion of these studies is that when the trunk was used as a compensation, the movement pattern of incorporating the trunk was ingrained into the reaching pattern. It wasn't reach and then the trunk moved. The trunk was moving right from the very beginning. So it wasn't, it was integral to the reaching pattern. And this implied that to break up that compensatory pattern, we had to do something to stop the trunk from moving, to relearn the reaching pattern right from the beginning. And it led to a series of studies on using trunk restraint on recovery of reaching ability in patients with stroke and in children with cerebral palsy. We hypothesized that since the system treated the trunk segment as a natural part of reaching, in order to retrain reaching, the trunk segment had to be removed from the pattern entirely. Movement had to be relearned using many, many repetitions. And we did this by using the trunk restraint system. You can see, actually, if you want to look at the gray squiggle on the bottom, the figure on the left, the two top boxes are healthy subjects, and the middle two is patients with mild stroke, and the bottom two are patients with a severe stroke. So when the person is reaching, this is the interjoint coordination between the shoulder and the elbow during reaching. It should be a straight line. But when the person is reaching without the trunk restraint on the severe patients on the bottom, you can see this gray squiggle, which means there's no coordination at all between the two joints. But as soon as a trunk restraint is put on, the coordination returns. So given the biomechanical advantage of restraining the trunk, the system reorganizes itself immediately. It didn't even need to learn it. Okay, the pattern was already there. After this paper was published, many other labs began studying different types of trunk restraint and its effects on motor recovery, and with encouraging results. I'd like to pause for a moment to point out to you, if you haven't already noticed, that much of the focus of my work has been on the upper limb. And I chose to study upper limb movement since it's a system that permits the study of motor redundancy and adaptability a little bit more than the more stereotypical movements of the lower limb. Because of this focus, I was invited to write a chapter in the International Handbook of Occupational Therapy Interventions, earning me, I guess, the title of Honorary OT. So despite this dubious and suspicious title, in 2004, I climbed over the mountain again to take the directorship of the physical therapy program at the School of Physical and Occupational Therapy at McGill, which I held until 2008. So after many mountaineering expeditions across the island, I now found myself full circle back at my first alma mater. During the last 50 years, 3 large conferences focused on the need to integrate theory into practice, particularly in neurological rehabilitation. The first, called New Step, was held in Chicago in 1966. The second, called Step 2, was held in Oklahoma in 1990. And the third, Step 3 was called the Summer Institute on Translating Evidence into Practice, and was held in Salt Lake City, Utah in 2005. After an extremely interesting and thought-provoking meeting, 4 primary conclusions emerged. 1, that client-centered empowerment models need to be the platform for all neurorehab and post-disease models of care. Second, that evidence-based practice needs to start with the documentation of clinical effectiveness based on reliable and valid measurement tools, followed by efficacy studies. Third, a strong link is needed among basic science, clinical science, and disease-specific motor dysfunction research to develop the best patient management environments. And fourth, that movement science belongs to a broad community that requires integration of the goals, cultural beliefs, ethnic values, emotional understanding, and scientific knowledge of many individuals including but not limited to healthcare providers, clinical research practitioners, basic science researchers, educators, clients, families, and employers. At that conference, I had the opportunity to sit on a panel discussing one of the problems of this new interdisciplinarity. It was becoming more and more obvious that profession-specific operational definitions of neuroplasticity terminology in particular, in both neuroscience and clinical rehab, didn't always coincide. In other words, we weren't talking the same language. We said the same words with different definitions. And that was a barrier to progress in neurorehab. With this reality confronting us, I went out on a limb and joined forces with another clinical researcher in the US who's already mentioned, Steve Wolf at Emory, and an animal researcher, Jeff Klein, in order to see if we could write a paper to define these terms and agree. And after many discussions and heated debates, we did come to some conclusion. We defined motor recovery as the reappearance of elemental motor patterns present prior to the CNS injury. This is motor recovery at the behavioral or movement level, not the brain level. And motor compensation as the appearance of new motor patterns resulting from the adaptation of remaining motor elements or substitution by different end effectors or body segments. The article focused on the importance of objective movement analysis to distinguish between motor recovery and compensation at different levels of behavior according to the ICF. And I would hope that we did notice a change in the use of this terminology, especially the word recovery, which is often malused in the literature since this paper was published. But compensation and its implications continues to be an important theme in my research. In 2010, we had collected enough data to be able to analyze how compensatory trunk movement could be used as a marker for motor stroke severity. We found that there was indeed a difference in the amount of trunk displacement that distinguished between mild and moderate stroke severity, and that this amount was different for pointing tasks compared to tasks involving grasping. So according to this analysis, this graph shows over here that the cutoff point between mild and severe stroke for a pointing task included 5 centimeters of trunk movement, but for a reaching task, the cutoff point only occurred at 10 centimeters of movement. Despite the importance of identifying compensatory movement in the assessment of motor recovery, there were very few scales that directly assessed movement quality during reaching and grasping in patients with stroke, OT or PT. Thus, we developed and validated a clinical scale for this purpose, which is based on what physiotherapists do best, and that is what I call observational kinematics, or observational movement analysis, by using the trained eye of the therapist. Using scales such as this, we started to conduct clinical trials using different techniques to reduce compensation and improve motor recovery. One technique that's been developed in my lab during the past 10 years involves the use of technology, notably virtual reality, as a means of driving neuroplasticity through motivating practice environments and providing appropriate feedback at different levels of learning. So if I want to give feedback about trunk use, I can use the virtual reality for that. Here are 2 examples of them. These VR environments do not use low-cost, commercially available technology, like the Wii or the Kinect, which is a drawback. This technology uses a highly technical platform in which the person is immersed and interacts with the 3D environment, and movements are recorded with precise motion analysis equipment. The environments have allowed us, though, to study aspects of motor control as well as different approaches to motor learning by manipulating feedback about motor performance and movement compensations. But the growth of all of this new information about technology and the role of technology in rehab can be very confusing. And to address this, Carolee Winstein from UCLA recently put together a special issue of Physical Therapy Journal from various experts in the field. I collaborated with Emily Keschner from Temple University and Tamar Weiss from the University of Haifa, and took on the challenge of informing the clinical community about how the principles of VR can be used to incorporate motor control and motor learning principles into clinical applications, thus starting to complete the link between basic science and practice. When one of my colleagues heard that I was going to be the Enid Graham Memorial Lecturer this year, she said, "I guess that means you'll be retiring soon." Well, I was taken aback because I don't consider that I've even scratched the surface of all the questions that remain in evidence-based neurological practice. And in a sense, I feel like I've only really just begun. I've been exceedingly lucky in my career to have been able to work together with exceptional colleagues, mentors, and students as I scaled Mount Royal over and over again. And here are some of the people and funding agencies who contributed to the work that I have presented today. Once again, I'd like to sincerely thank the CPA for giving me this great honor and to allow me the time to reflect on my career, giving me the opportunity to take a look back and imagine what the future looked then, and take a look now and imagine what the future will be in the future. So thank you very much again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Do you want me to get off this?
Please, if you would. Congratulations.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Wow, Dr. Levin, that's fantastic. And again, as president, there's so many blessings that you have as a president to do, and one of the greatest honors is to call the winner of the Enid Graham Lecture, and it was just a fantastic experience to have called Dr. Levin and given her the word. We were in Singapore at WCPT, and Mindy, as you saw, there was a slide that Carol had put up. There was a dispatch. They were doing news every day. There was a news bullet out of kind of who's making waves in Singapore at WCPT, and Dr. Levin was one of the bullet points of here's what we're doing. So an amazing international ambassador, and waves the CPA flag tall and wide. So thank you, Dr. Levin. It's brilliant. We're now happy to invite all of you to celebrate the opening of the Congress 2015. Please join us in the exhibit hall for some food and fun, and Dr. Mindy Levin will be at the CPA booth, so please come by and meet her and congratulate her. And I just wish everyone just a wonderful weekend here in Halifax, and just have an amazing time, create an amazing time, because again, this is your Congress. Thank you.